All right, welcome back in, everybody, to another edition of Gators, a breakdown. This is our version number 10, along with David Waters. I'm Mark Rogers, coming your way each and every week, if not a couple times a week, for Florida Gators talk. Woo! That was a rough one in the second half against Tennessee. And before we dive into it, just want to remind you that this is part of the SEC Breakdown Network. You can join us on Twitter and Facebook at SEC Breakdown for Gators Breakdown. We're available on iTunes and also the video version here on YouTube as well. Dave, wow. I think it all started for me along the line of scrimmage with Florida just dominating up front. Caleb Brantley and the crew were just explosive, getting into the backfield constantly. The offensive line looked good in protecting Austin Appleby, and it just was firing on all cylinders for two quarters.
Right. Florida had to be happy with what they were getting in the first half. They basically had Tennessee right where they wanted them. It was, to my point, if you look at the stats of even in game, take away Tennessee stats, but look at just Florida stats, you would have had to have been happy with that. Over 400 yards of offense. Appleby throws for almost 300 yards. Jalen Tabor, Quincy Wilson have an interception, and they still lose. But yeah, we'll just concentrate back on the first half right now. Everything was rolling. Play calling was rolling. I loved the Jim McElwain screen game from Alabama. That reared its head yesterday in the first half. Had Tennessee guessing, had Tennessee off balance. Jordan Scarlett was running over for 6 yards a carry. Austin Appleby was taking shots down the field and hitting the shots down the field with Antonio Callaway and Tyree Cleveland. It was, everything Florida fans wanted it to be. 21-3, up 21-0 at one point, and you would think, that played right into the Florida's defense's hands. With the way that defensive line had been playing and the way the secondary had been playing, you would have think, being up a couple scores with Tennessee probably having to pass to come back, played right into Florida's hands, but that was not the case.
Yeah, we see 21-3 get wiped out in college football multiple times per week, but not against Florida's defense. And that's what was surprising to me. And considering the psychology of the series, and we talked with Mike Laval, our Tennessee friend on SEC Breakdown about this last night, just it being the monumental game in the Eastern Division, and because of the history of the two sides, and because Tennessee desperately needing this game in terms of the program building of Butch Jones. Once they got down at that point, I don't want to say after the fact, after listening to Butch Jones at halftime on CBS, that I had a feeling they were going to come back because it's not out there. But all the logical reason was for Florida to continue to dominate play. They just seemed to be in Tennessee's heads at that point, and there seemed to be no going back.
Right. Like I said, it's what Florida wanted. I mean, it's what Florida needed, you would have thought. Get up a couple scores, take your crowd out of it, put the doubt in the Tennessee player's mind and the coach's mind, but that wasn't the case. Florida, after halftime, I'll give credit to Tennessee. Most of the credit to Tennessee. They went in with some great adjustments. They made some, great second half adjustments. I think they probably knew Florida would probably not be as aggressive as they were in the first half. Probably content with not letting Austin Appleby attempt many more passes, maybe interceptions. Start getting them back in the game. And plus, like I said, Florida wasn't running the ball that bad in the first half. With Jordan Scarlett averaging 6 yards a carry. I think Florida probably came out thinking they could run on this Tennessee offense, maybe, get rid of some, or the Tennessee defense, maybe run some clock out and, and maybe escape, maybe scoring just one more touchdown. Who would have thought, being up 21-3, most Gator fans probably thought 21 points was already enough, then not thinking probably Tennessee would score, maybe more than 17 points, in the game. So I think, with the way Tennessee probably knew Florida was going to come out and be a little bit more conservative. As long as they shored up their run game defense, they would play right into Tennessee's defensive hands. So, I'm pretty sure Florida players got a little complacent, a little comfortable. All the trash talking they did, I'm pretty sure they thought in their minds once 21 up to 3-2 that there was no way this Tennessee offense was going to come back. But that was not meant to be. I think a little bit of more Tennessee than it was Florida. But I think the coaching goes a little bit with this in a way feels like last year's Florida Tennessee game, just the other way around. Tennessee got up big in the fourth quarter, and Florida came roaring back, and now kind of flip the script this year. So, it's more to do with than just a game right now. Just in the minds of going into halftime, I really think that Florida thought they could be conservative. That played right into Tennessee's hands, and Josh Dobbs basically just took over the game in the second half.
Yeah, a couple things that were very correctable for Tennessee that had nothing to do with Florida was they dropped 5 or 6 passes from Josh Dobbs in the first half. Ethan Wolf had a couple obvious drops. One was down the seam that would have set them up pretty inside the 25-yard line. Alvin Kamara, of course, on the big 3rd and 6, I think it was, in the red zone inside the 15, was trying to turn before he had it. He lost it. They only kicked a field goal that should have been a touchdown. He might have waltzed into the end zone or at least put them inside the 5-yard line. So Tennessee, that was the obvious adjustment, that just hang on to the football and catch the football. But it was kind of surprising to see guys just running free in the secondary for the big plays that took it from like 21-10 to all of a sudden, boom, it's 24-21 Tennessee, 31-21 right after that. The Josh Malone play, the Jawan Jennings down the sideline when he barely kept it in bounds and made the play. So I want you to speak to that in terms of what happened to the secondary advantage for a Florida secondary that we consider one of the best in the nation. And then also on the flip side, drop passes usually. That's just concentration. But you expect when one line is physically dominant over another that's just going to continue if they're physically dominant for one half. But all of a sudden, Derek Barnett's all over the backfield. Todd Kelly Jr., he's wreaking havoc for Tennessee. Those guys were just a menace in the second half.
Right, like I said, I really thought that played into Tennessee's hands. I think the Florida players at halftime thought the game was over, and the coaches thought they could be conservative, and that just wasn't going to happen in this rivalry game. We talked about pregame or pre-week, this game leading up to this game. I said there was going to be a game where this Tennessee offense would click. I didn't think it would happen mid-game like it did this game. Like speaking to your point, Mark, it is weird to see an offensive line, defensive line get dominated for one half, but then come out and just completely switch to flip the switch to that very next game, or the very next half. I didn't think this is the game I thought Tennessee's offense could do. If they would have started this game like this, I could understand that more than I could have what really happened. I thought the Florida defense would come out and do this job in the second half. And I didn't think they would completely shut Tennessee down. Tennessee's too much talent, too much experienced talent for that, playing at home with that crowd. But speaking for the secondary, Duke Dawson, he looked lost at times yesterday. And when Jalen Tabor went down, he went straight to the locker room for a while. He wasn't even on the field. But even a point there where he got faked out a little bit and lost his balance and fell down, and that led to one of the touchdowns. So Duke Dawson, because he was probably the one where, Tabor's that happens. So defenders lose their balance. Leave with defenders open. That's on him a little bit. You get faked out, but he probably knowing him, he could have recovered a good bit, and maybe not that play maybe not turn into a touchdown. But for Duke Dawson to be lost like he was, it was the wheel route was on him. He went. The running back was coming. Hurd was there, but he went to another guy that was in the flats. Left Hurd wide open, and then there was a crossing route, the other touchdown for Tennessee. He just basically got lost, let the receiver by him, and that was all she wrote. So, it was. And speaking of that, this Florida defense is very high risk reward, and they live off the defensive line getting a lot of pressure. For the most part, that wasn't happening. So, the secondary also reaps the rewards of the defensive line getting in the backfield, and that wasn't happening either in the second half, like it was in the first half. So, and Josh Dobbs, he looked basically like like what we thought would Dak Prescott, Tim Tebow-ish, just completely taking over a game. There were wide open running lanes for him as well. For this, we really thought Jared Davis, Alex Anzalone with that running game would step up and shut that down. But you got to speak to the senior leadership of Dobbs there, and for that Tennessee offense not giving up. And like I think like you said in the first half, there were drop passes that Tennessee could go back and look at, saying the plays are there. But the Florida defense also, once they got in the red zone, clamped down in the first half. That didn't happen in the second half either. But Florida also came into this game leading the nation in plays given up more than 10 yards. Well, that didn't show up yesterday. It was big plays for Tennessee that really, really was the big difference. It wasn't Tennessee necessarily driving the field a good bit. It was the big plays. That's something that we're really not used to seeing from the Florida defense.
You found your way to Gators Breakdown. We come your way once or twice a week here on the SEC Breakdown Network. Catches on YouTube, catches on Twitter as well, and on Facebook. So, Dave, the thing that I've got to say about the play calling is that I can understand if you've got the ball first at 21-3 coming out in the second half and saying, hey, if Scarlett and Cronkrite can get us, 7 and 8 yards on, or at least 4 on first down, we'll just keep with that formula until they stop it. We don't need to open up things. But Tennessee got the ball. It's 21-10. They go down and drive. So before you touch the ball, it's kind of a ball game again. The crowd's in it. It's 21-10. So you can't necessarily go in with the approach that, okay, we're going to deflate the ball and sit on this thing, because you're only a couple minutes into the third quarter and it's already a game. 21-10. They've scored 10 straight points. I think you pretty much have to game plan as you did starting with Series 1.
You're right. There was nothing off balance. The play calling became very predictable. Run first down, run second down, trying to make something happen on third down. We're not putting this game on Austin Appleby at all. Yes, he had one boneheaded interception he probably could have kept himself out of. But you know what? For the most part, you give me those stats before the game, I'm taking those stats all day, every day. Austin Appleby played well, hit the deep ball in the first half. But in the second half, we go in. Like I said, it was very predictable play calling. Mark, I agree. You do run the ball until I guess Tennessee proves that they couldn't. But Tennessee basically came out right at the second half, at the beginning of the second half, and proved that they were ready. They stopped Jordan Scarlett on a 3rd and short. That's been kind of Florida's bugaboo going into this year, is short yardage, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1s, and getting stopped this year. So I don't think the coaches should have felt as confident as they did in the running game, as far as just trying to let it solely take over in the second half. I don't blame them for running the ball a little bit more. You were running the ball well in the first half. You were hoping you could run some clock out, but that just wasn't the case. This offense also is based off of play action offense. We saw it against the Kentucky game. We saw it first half yesterday. If it can go run out the play action, that's when this offense is at its best. When that running game was getting shut down in the second half, that basically ruined that as well. So, credit for Tennessee as well. All the injuries they had on defense, they came out. It didn't matter. And you mentioned the defensive line was basically just pushing the Florida offensive line in the back, and basically looking like the Florida offensive line that struggled at times against North Texas and UMass. Not so much against Kentucky. That was their best game of the year. But it's never as good as it seems, and as bad as it seems. This Florida team, it was up 21-3 in a hostile environment. They showed the mentality of getting up, and they showed what they are capable of on offense, and with a capable quarterback in Austin Appleby. But to fall apart like that, I put it more on the coaches than I do anything else, and a complacent defense. I don't blame the offense so much as far as execution. I put it more on the coaching staff.
Yeah, getting beat up front on both sides of the ball in the second half after dominating in the first half, I think really speaks into, we don't know what's going on between the ears, but it kind of confirms to a certain extent that maybe there was an attitude that we've got things salted away and we really beat this team physically in the first half and things are going our way and there's no way that they can score on us at this point because, schemes change. You can make adjustments at halftime. Even you can find some certain players, some intestinal fortitude and fight a little bit harder in the second half. But for both lines to get beat in the second half after winning those battles decidedly in the first half seems to play into that theory. So next is Vanderbilt on the road. So it's not so much about Vandy because the talent would dictate a Florida win here. Not that you can look past, not that it would be the greatest upset in history, but it should be a win. But it's even more so for down the line and playing out the schedule and possibly having a chance if Florida can get knocked off by Alabama and somebody else, playing your way back into the Eastern Division race and just having a good season regardless of what Tennessee has. So what do you see going forward? I guess we're going to learn a lot about this Florida team because we thought about Tennessee having the fragile psyche and what was going to happen to them after this game, but we can almost spin it the Florida direction in regards to what the Gators have and how they're going to show some resilience from this.
Right. You got to see how they bounce back from a game they really thought was in hand at one point. From all the trash talking they did towards Tennessee, and basically getting shown up on defense. You basically have to look at this and come out and play mad. You have to be mad at the way this game turned out. Not upset, not sad. You have to be mad. So that's what this offense and defense needs to show, especially along the line of scrimmage. You're better than Vanderbilt. You're better than Vanderbilt. Now go prove it. And don't sulk. Tennessee's got a tough, still 3-game stretch coming up. So the season's not over. You have to know that. But yeah, it will take some luck, a little bit. Basically Tennessee basically has a 2-game lead on you now. If somehow they lose to Georgia and Florida beats Georgia, that creates, somewhat of a 3-way tie, later on in the season. But that means taking care of business against Vanderbilt, first and foremost. You need to play mad. The coaches need to show that, they have confidence in Austin Appleby again on another road trip. This is back-to-back road trips. You're not playing in the friendly confines of the Swamp a week after this debacle. You're going on the road again. So, you have to look at yourself. You have to look yourself in the mirror. You have to, know you can call plays better. You have to know your offensive line. You're better than that defensive line. You need to go do something. And this Florida defense needs to get its swagger back. They try to create some swagger with all the trash talk. And it come back and bit them. So, the swagger is in how you play, not in how you talk. So it starts with, trying to, create another somewhat winning streak when you go to Vanderbilt.
Dave, think about it. If history means anything in the SEC Eastern Division in the last 5 to 10 years, how many times have we seen the big head-to-head matchup go one way, but the other team lost the 2 games that made up for it? Whether it was Georgia, Missouri one year where Georgia beat Mizzou, but then they went and lost 2 other games. They even beat them 34-0 and still lost the division. One time it was Florida, Georgia, where the Gators won that, but then they lost 2 other, or it was the other way around. Georgia won that game, and or the Gators won the game. Georgia gets the benefit and goes to the and it's been back and forth. Georgia, South Carolina, that worked out a couple times where South Carolina won the big head-to-head early, but then they lose 2 other games, and it's happened a number of times. So this thing's not over. As you mentioned, Tennessee with a difficult 3-game stretch, and by looking at Florida's schedule, wow, there's not a ridiculously difficult stretch, but they got 5 legitimate games to deal with here. Talking LSU, Georgia, Arkansas, and also, of course, Florida State at the end. That's not going to vie into the division race, but still a difficult game there. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to see.
And if you look at that, if Florida plays as good as they can, which we saw first half yesterday, and they come out and dominate Vanderbilt, you host LSU, you have to think they'll be favored there. The Florida will probably, as long as they're playing well enough, be favored all the way up until they travel to Arkansas. They'll probably be favored, they should be favored against LSU coming at home in a couple of weeks, as long as they don't stumble their toe against Vanderbilt. And they should be favored against Missouri. And then they'll play Georgia and Jacksonville, neutral site. So, that line of that game. But going to Arkansas the week after that game, it'll probably be the first time for right now that we can see them being a decided underdog. So you're right. They'll be favored in these SEC games coming up. And if they take care of business, it's that Arkansas game that really the Georgia game. Of course, you have to win that game because it's an East game. If Tennessee slips up somewhere along the way, that's a game that it will come down to. So, Florida has everything in front of it, and we need some some bad luck from Tennessee, to get back in it. But you're right, Mark. It doesn't matter the big head-to-head so much right now when and we've talked about this before, the big schedule disadvantage some teams get, looks like Tennessee's going to get the top 2 teams out of the West. A&M, after they defeated Arkansas, you definitely would place them second in the West right now behind Alabama. So, and Tennessee's going to have those 2 teams back to back. So LSU doesn't look as good as we thought they would. Their defense is still stout, but that offense still has question marks, and they're traveling to the Swamp. Florida's trying to hex a 4-game losing streak against them. But we'll see. Florida still has everything in front of them and probably be favored in most of these SEC games coming up.
All right, Gators Breakdown. This is the place to talk Florida Gators. We come your way once or twice a week on iTunes. Catch us on YouTube as well, where we've got the video podcast available. And it's all part of SEC Breakdown, where you can join Dave, myself, Mike LaValle, Chad Niepling for SEC material throughout the week. Join us on Twitter and Facebook as well. All right, Dave. Wow. go to Vandy, get things cleaned up, and go on from there. So we'll see how things shake out, and Florida is able to bounce back from what could be a devastating loss, but they still have the season out in front of them. All right. Thanks for joining us on Gators Breakdown. See you next time.